Flagstaff home. I don't know about you, but some things about gardening can be a mystery, and I have learned in recent years the importance of soil and having a balance in your soil. And so today we're going to talk about how you can actually test your soil in your gardens to make sure that they are that they have the kind of nutrients and the balance of nutrients that will help your vegetables produce well. So I have in the past used crop rotation. I still do actually, and crop rotation is a really good way to help your soil, because if you follow a heavy feeder like a tomato with a plant like peas or beans, that will help to nourish the soil. So tomatoes suck nutrients out of the soil, and peas and beans put nutrients back into the soil. And so if you're rotating your crops, you can kind of put one that feeds the soil following one that saps the nutrients out of the soil. But if you want to get more technical about it, you can test your soil, and I would actually really encourage you to do that, because that helps you to know what kind of fertilizer to use and how you can amend your soil. Last summer was the first time that I tested my soil. I got this handy dandy little kit here, and it's called the Rapid Test Soil Test Kit by Luster Leaf. I'm going to pop in a picture so you can see that in there, and it indicates to you what your soil pH is, what your potash is, and that's potassium level, what your nitrogen level is, and what your phosphorus level is. So let's talk about those things for a second here. pH, it is an indication of how acidic your soil is. If you have high pH, then you've got very little acidity in your soil. If you have low pH, then you've got a more acidic soil. So in Flagstaff, we are notorious for having high pH. We cannot grow in the ground here without a whole lot of amending. We cannot grow blueberries because they need an acidic soil. Azaleas need acidic soil. And so you don't see azaleas where I live because it's a very alkaline soil. This will indicate the pH level. Then there's also, so you're also looking at the potash, which is potassium, and it will indicate how much or little you have, and you can use more or less potash to increase or decrease the pH of your soil. When you add potash to your soil, you are increasing the pH. Where I live, we don't need to do that. We already have high pH, so highly alkaline soil. Then there's nitrogen, of course, which is helpful for the plants to grow strong and leafy and tall and all of that. And nitrogen is great to have in the soil at the beginning of the growing season when the plants are getting to their full size. You want to make sure not to use too much of it though, because it can make your plants really tender and very tasty to aphids. Then we move on to phosphorus. Phosphorus is what the soil needs to have in it so that the plants will start to flower and produce their fruit. So if you just have tons of nitrogen, you'll get this big old leafy plant producing nothing. This can be really helpful, and then it demystifies the process of going and getting your fertilizer from a nursery or Home Depot. Fertilizers will have different numbers on them that say this is a fertilizer that has that's going to add a lot of nitrogen to your soil. This one's going to add a lot of phosphorus to your soil. Okay. All of this to say that I'm going to go through and show you how to do this test. I did the test and filmed a lot of this stuff yesterday because I started one of the tests. The stuff has to sit overnight, and so I did part of the test yesterday. I let some stuff sit overnight, and I finished the rest of it today. So, so just to let you know how that goes. But I'll just be quiet now, and we'll go on to how you test your soil. So for starters, what I need to do is go outside and get some dirt, about 2 to 3 inches below the soil surface. I'm going to put it in this mason jar. The instructions say to get a cup of dirt and 5 cups of distilled water, but I know I'm not going to need that much, so I'm just going to do a half a cup of dirt and put in 2.5 cups of water, and then you let that sit out for 30 minutes up to 24 hours.
So I think the longer you sit it, the better. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that first. There's one test I can do just on the dirt where I don't have to let it sit with water. All right, so this is the soil that I got from my tomato garden, and this is the one that I got from my squash garden. Primarily squash is growing there. I am going to fill these with 2.5 cups of water in each one of distilled water, but before I do that, I'm gonna do the pH test. And so for the pH test, I have the little pH container. They all have different scales on them, and so you have to make sure you have the right little container for the right test. So I have that, I have the matching green capsule, and then you can see here that I have a little, it's a 1/4 teaspoon. And the reason I have that is you're not supposed to touch the soil with your fingers. You don't want to get the pH of your skin interfering with the test. And so I'm going to use this to scoop the soil just a tiny bit right to that little fill line right here. Then the next thing I do is break open this capsule and pour the powder in here, and then I fill the rest of this little column here up with distilled water. And then I shake it up and let it sit for a minute. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. Okay, so a minute has passed, and this is for the squash garden. It looks like, gosh, it's not as dark as that green one, but it's as that top green one, but it's not as light as this one. So I'd say the pH out in my squash garden is a little bit higher, which is a little strange because that's another raised bed. But yeah, so we've done the pH test now. And now the thing, this is gonna take some time, is I'm gonna fill these with the 2.5 cups in each one. Remember the instructions said put a cup of dirt and 5 cups of water. I don't need to do that much, so I'm just gonna do 1/2 cup and 2.5 cups of water in each one. You shake it up and then you let it sit from anywhere between 30 minutes and 24 hours. I'm gonna probably let it sit for several hours. And remember to use distilled water, because if you don't, that's gonna mess with your test, because water itself has its own level of pH and all kinds of stuff like that. So you don't wanna mess with that. So make sure you use distilled water. Let me go ahead and do that. Now here they are, and you can see, in case you were wondering what this was, I just labeled with T and S for tomato and squash, so I remember which one it is. The jars are different sizes, so it looks like one is filled higher than the other. There are 2.5 cups of water in each one of those. I shook it up. It's a mucky looking mess right now, and then as it sits over time, it's gonna separate. So we'll end up with most of the dirt and debris at the bottom, and then it will separate out to this lighter part of just the water, and the water part is what we're gonna use for the additional test. So here are the samples now. They've been sitting for almost 24 hours. It's kind of interesting that one of them is a little bit cloudier than the other and a little bit darker in color, but they said that that's normal, and especially because they're two different beds, then it would stand to reason that the soil wouldn't be exactly the same. So the next thing I'm gonna do is come over, and I have these 3 compartment things. This one is to test the potash. Anyway, and then for nitrogen for this one and phosphorus for this one. I have the corresponding capsules for each of these. The next thing I'm gonna do, the directions say to fill both sides now. This side, which will help, apparently you fill, this is gonna be the test side where I put the capsule, the powder from the capsule in, and this side you put in because it helps to give the correct color here by tinting it a little bit with the color of the water. So for example, this one is lighter and that one's darker, so the results would come out different on here because that's a darker color. But if I fill this compartment here with either of these, it's gonna tinge these just the right color so you can get an accurate reading. So I'm gonna do this first with the tomato bed and then with the squash bed. So let me go ahead and do that. All right, they're all filled with water. This, this one, you can see on the back there's water on both sides. This one is a little bit darker over here because I've added the powder. I've added the powder to each one of these. So this is already starting to turn a color. And then I'm supposed to let it sit for 10 minutes. And at the end of 10 minutes is when I can start comparing the color of the water over here to the scale on the side on this little chart. So I'm gonna let it sit for 10 minutes. We'll come back and see what it tells us. All right, so this has been sitting for 10 minutes, and now it's time to compare the colors. I'm gonna hold these up to the light so you can see it a little bit better. It appears, this is the potash. I just looked it up to see how you pronounce that. It appears that the potash is really light. It looks like it's either adequate or sufficient. Sorry, I gotta get it in the light here so you can see this. Or sufficient, so we're probably okay on the potash, but I don't know, we'll see. So the next one is nitrogen. Move this over here. It appears that we are probably, it looks like it's adequate on nitrogen. And then this is the phosphorus, and the phosphorus is quite dark, so it looks like we're good on the phosphorus. So yeah, there we go. So now I got to test the squash bed. And what I'll do is I'll rinse these out. I need to make sure that I get them as dry as possible inside. Just so you know, I've been using this little syringe thing. The kit comes with a dropper, but I couldn't find it. So I've been using that because you don't want to touch the water sample. So I'm going to get these as dried out as possible, and then I'm going to try this with the squash bed soil and see what we have there. All right, so this is the test for the soil in the squash bed, and this one right here, this is the potash. This one, it comes out as being sufficient, so right in here, so we don't need to add or reduce that at all. This is the nitrogen, and it is depleted, so we definitely need some nitrogen in that squash bed, and it would confirm to me why my squash plants are looking a little yellow, so they need some more nitrogen. And if we come over here to the phosphorus looks fairly, well, if we hold it up, it's a little bit different. If we hold it up to the light, yeah, it's fairly dark. So it's either, it's probably sufficient. So we're good on phosphorus, but this squash bed seriously needs some nitrogen. So now we've tested our soil, and what does all this mean? Well, it gives us an indication of what we should do in terms of fertilizer. I don't know about you, but I've gone into nurseries or into Home Depot, and I'm looking at all the different fertilizers, and I'm mystified. I don't know what to get. Okay, so here's the thing. There are always 3 numbers on fertilizers, and one of them is the indication of whether it's nitrogen heavy fertilizer or phosphorus heavy, or it will the potash is indicated with a K. So phosphorus is indicated with a P, the nitrogen is indicated with an N, and the potash is indicated with the letter K. I don't know why, but it lists the numbers then. And so what I know is that for my squash bed, what I need is something that has a lot of nitrogen in it. So I want to get something that's going to have kind of a balance, and I need something that's a little heavier in nitrogen. You look on the label, and it's going to be hard to determine if you don't test your soil. It's going to be hard to determine what you need. If you don't want to test your soil, you can be thinking at the beginning of the season when the plants are growing, they need nitrogen. At the middle of the season, they need phosphorus to start flowering and producing fruit, if you want to go really, really basic. But if you really want to know what's up with your soil, just go purchase one of these kits. So yeah, hopefully this was helpful to you, and hopefully you will
be able to test your soil and find out if you have the right kind of conditions. I'll be interested to hear what you find out in your garden. So if you try this and you test your soil, or if you have any magic tricks for how you do this, just comment below. And if you are not subscribed to my channel, just hit that button. YouTube will let you know when I upload new videos to this channel. And I hope I'll see you again on my Flagstaff home. Bye-bye.